Hello and welcome to Music Wars. We've got a great one for you today. We're going to do a little bit of digging into Elvis and the stars, the songwriters, different people talking about Elvis for a couple of days. This is an interview with Mac Davis from the Tennessean. I believe Mac wrote 7 songs for Elvis, at least 4 that were huge. In the Ghetto, Memories, a little less conversation, Don't Cry Daddy. Um, so you could absolutely say the late 60s, early 70s were a huge time for Mac Davis with Elvis Presley. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, ring the notification bell so you'll know when the next video is out, and leave your comments and any requests or dedications you want done. We're going to jump right into this. This is Mac Davis being interviewed by the Tennessean.
Hi, I'm Bart Herbison, Executive Director of the Nashville Songwriters Association. And this week, the story behind the song with the legendary Hall of Fame songwriter, my friend Mac Davis, As the Snow Flies in the Ghetto. You know I'm a huge Elvis fan.
I do.
And you had a pretty good run with the King. We'll start on another Elvis song. You really were doing other things. And a buddy of ours named Bobby Tomberlin called you one day and said, you got the #1 song in umpteen countries.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were on the golf course and hung up the phone on him because you didn't know about it.
No, I was at home, and he just called up and he said, "Hey, congratulations on your hit." And I said, "What hit?" And he said, "Your Elvis record." And I said, "What Elvis record?" And he said, "A Little Less Conversation." And I said, "Man, that was 35 years ago or something." He said, "No, it's #1 in England right now." And I said, "You're kidding me." And I didn't know anything at all about it and had no idea. I know that I had seen it in Ocean's 11 in the movie,
There's a few
the
seconds
original
of it,
version
yeah.
of it. Yeah, they did a little montage scene and they used it in there. And even that, nobody told me about that. I poked my wife in the ribs and said, "Hey, that's my song." And she says, "Well, I'll be." And there it was. And so I thought, well, how could that, I don't understand what's going on. And he said, "The remix, it's a remix." And I said, "I still don't get it." And he said, "Well, it was in those Nike commercials for the World Cup soccer match." I said, "Oh my gosh!" And next thing I know, I started hearing it. I saw the commercial, and one thing led to another. It turned out to be one of the biggest hits I ever had.
Well, and that's led to
Typical of songwriters.
Yeah.
I was the last guy to find out.
Yeah, but you really got back into it hard. You've been spending some time in Nashville. You've got another cool thing going on right now that we'll talk about a little bit later. But you grew up, just like me and everybody else, Elvis Presley. He was the man.
Yep.
And you wrote one of the greatest songs that's ever been recorded, In the Ghetto.
Well, I don't know if that's one of the greatest
I
ever.
know it is, and he thought so too, because Elvis had done all the movies. He wanted something socially relevant. He did 2 of them before he passed. He did that, and later on he did If I Can Dream, and he said that in all the interviews. I know the first time he ever heard it, he's like, "That's my song." But how did it get created, Mac?
Well, it's kind of a convoluted story, but it's a true story. I had been trying to write a song called The Vicious Circle for, seems like, ages. And I wasn't that old enough to be ages. I was in my late 20s. And the word ghetto was just becoming popular to describe the parts of urban areas that where poor people were living and couldn't get out. And were stuck there. Everybody took off to the suburbs. And and left these inner cities. They started calling them ghetto. And the vicious circle, I grew up with a little kid whose daddy worked with my daddy. And he was a black kid. And he and I, we were good buddies. We were 5 years old, 6 years old. And I remember him being just one of my, my best buddies. But he lived in a part of town that I couldn't figure out why they had to live where they lived and we got to live where we lived. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we didn't have broken bottles every 6 inches. It was a dirt street ghetto where he lived. And at any rate, I'd always wanted to write a song about it, where a kid is born and he doesn't have a male parent, and he falls in with the wrong people and he dies, and there's just another kid comes along and replaces him. It's just a vicious circle. And long story short, I couldn't find anything to rhyme with circle. And it's the old story, oranges. But I was sitting in the office one day. I had this little office that Nancy Sinatra had signed me to her publishing company. And a buddy of mine, Freddie Weller, came over. And Freddie I had known from when I lived in Atlanta. But at this time I was living in California, in Los Angeles. Long story short, Freddie came over and we were fiddling around, and he said, "Hey, I got this lick that Joe South showed me. And it's really a nice lick." And he played this lick on a guitar and went to, and boy, I just heard, "In the ghetto." I didn't say anything. Went home that night, and I sat down with that lick and I started singing In the Ghetto. And by about 2 o'clock in the morning, I had written the song. It just wrote itself. I'm sure people have heard that a million times, but the song does. Once it gets going, it kind of writes itself. And once you find your hook, and that's what that was. And of course, I called Freddie up, as I was wont to do in those days, and sung him the song at 2 o'clock in the morning. Woke him up and sung it to him. And there was a long silence, and he said some foul cuss word and hung the phone up on me. And
biggest compliment he could have given.
Biggest compliment. He wasn't upset with me stealing. He was just mad that he didn't get to write part of that song. So, but at any rate, that's how it came about. And Elvis was looking for material. Suddenly, I had written a song called "Memories" for his comeback special, they called it. And "Memories" was going up the charts, and they just called and said, "You got anything else? Because we're going to go to Memphis and record with Chips Moman." And I had 19 songs on an old reel Wallensack tape recorder that I had put down, just me and a guitar. And the first song on there was In the Ghetto, and the second song on there was Don't Cry Daddy. And they ended up recording both of them for that album, and that they did in Memphis. And all of a sudden, people started talking to me, let me in the front door.
You remember the first time you heard Elvis's record of it?
Yes, I do.
Tell me about it.
Well, I got heard it on the radio, driving down the street, and I heard that. And I remember going, I wish he hadn't have said ghetto. I wish he'd just said In the Ghetto. But I remember thinking, but that's a typical songwriter, why didn't he just say In the Ghetto instead of In the Ghetto? But it lasted about maybe 5 seconds. And then I realized that I had a huge hit. I knew it was going to be a really, really big hit. So it was just like you. I always get excited the first time I hear a song, and I'm 72 years old now, and I hear something of mine on the radio. I still get excited about it.
Now, didn't you buy a car and a TV after you got that
did. I got a check from the way the Colonel had it set up. Elvis's picture was on the checks, and Elvis ended up getting publishing on the song, which was the way the Colonel worked it. And it was Elvis Presley music,
Right.
and Elvis's picture was on the check, and then I'd never made more than $12,000 in a year in my life, and I'd been depositing my check in the same bank, my little weekly salary, and I walked in with this big old check with a lot of zeros on it. Is all I'm going to say. And Elvis's picture on it, and I stood in line there and got up to the teller, and this little lady says, "Oh, hello, Mr. Davis," and I handed her that check, and I said, I want to deposit this, and I'd like a $10,000 cashier's check because I got a Mercedes picked out, and
It was red. I've
it
seen
was
it.
bright
And
red.
the license
cherry
plate said ND Ghetto.
Yeah, that was my Indy Ghetto car. But she had to go back, and she kind of laughed. She said, "Is that Elvis's picture?" I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Excuse me a minute." And she went back, and I saw her arguing through the glass partition with her, not arguing, but discussing it with her supervisor. And the supervisor's looking at it and looking back at me, and they finally figured out that, yeah, it looks legit. You know, it was like the old prospector biting a gold the gold nugget to make sure it was real gold. And they gave me the check. I went down. I bought that little Mercedes, and I drove it over to. They were having a sale on in Inglewood, California, on color TVs, and I'd never had a color TV before, and I bought this color TV and got it out there, and then couldn't get it in the car. It was too big for the little bitty sports car I'd bought. So we had to use twine, stuck it in the trunk, put twine to hold the trunk lid down, and there I am driving through this tough neighborhood now, going back to where I live, with a bright red, brand new Mercedes sports car with a color TV sticking out of the back. I might as well have had a sign on my back that said "Jack this fool."
Well, I got to tell you, if you want to grab that guitar, the song really created a lot of discussion, cultural awareness, and I just think it's one of the important songs in American music history. And that's the story behind the song this week for the Tennessean and Tennessean.com, Mac Davis.
And here's the lick. Sorry, Freddie. As the snow flies on a cold and gray Chicago morning, another little baby child is born in the ghetto. And his mama cries.
Great story from a great artist. Rest in peace, Mac Davis. Just, we all know what a wonderful uh, song that is. One of the more meaningful ones that Elvis ever done. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Music Wars. If you did, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we will see you back here same time tomorrow. So long from Music Wars.